initially, when these things used to happen to us back in the day, we used to be like, we don't sneak out and kill babies at night. I don't get it. It's just music. Like, we're just, like, everyone else is taking this far more seriously than we are. We're just four dudes that get together, write some songs, and try and have some laughs. Back in the day, it was a little more like, the furrowed brow. It was probably a little more painful. Now it's just kind of like, I think if that stops, we're in trouble.
So this is what I was thinking about in the shower, because this is how sad my life has become. I had said Nickelback's like the band I hate the most that we've covered.
Uh-huh.
And I think I have to go back and revise that, because I was thinking, like, some guy, gun to my head, said you have to listen to the whole discography of this band in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I think Baha Men might be the most painful.
That's, Cal, I considered this question too, and Baha Men, their worst material is some of the most atrocious stuff we've ever covered on this show. Like Nickelback, it's such earworms.
Yeah.
Like Move It Like This. Like, I can't tell you how many times I had that awful hook in my head.
Well, it brought up an interesting question though for me of like, so I think Baha Men is worse, but Nickelback pisses me off more. And then I couldn't figure out why that is. Because it's like, and I think it just comes down to personal taste. Like, I align a little more closely with post-grunge than I do with fucking millennial soundtrack Garfield movie pop that Baha Men does these days.
Mm-hmm.
And even their early stuff, the Junkanoo shit, like we alluded to back then, it's... You kind of got to be into dance a little, like you want to go somewhere and dance, and I'm just not that guy.
I actually like that part of their discography, but yeah, I get what you're saying. So maybe it's Nickelback. Maybe we hate it more because it was marketed to us.
Well, I think it's because Baha Men is clear about what they are. They just are upfront, like they're not out there trying to be serious in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Nickelback, you have Chad in these interviews trying to explain to you how diverse they are and all these feelings he can evoke with music, and you're going, no, you fucking can't.
It's like, well, we can make you miss your friend, or we could make you love your like prom queen, or we could make you want to go out to the bar, have a good time. What do you want? We got it. We got a whole stash of songs. What do you want? You want to buy a new car? We'll write a song about buying a new car.
Right. and Baha Men is just straight up like, oh yeah, we're in the Garfield movie. They're not out there trying to be a rock star in the same way.
No, for sure.
So, long story short, I think Nickelback, I shouldn't have said they're the worst thing we've covered, but they do piss me off the most, I think, of everything we've covered.
Indeed. All right, welcome to Polishing Turds with Nick and Cal. My name is Nick.
And I'm Cal.
And this is the show where we take a deep dive into the wonderful world of bad music. All right, folks, welcome to part 3 of our epic series on Nickelback, who we can't really decide is or is not the worst band we've ever covered on this show. And it is worth noting, Cal, I think that part of this is just we're a little biased, right? Because they're the ones that we're doing right now. And a lot of times when we're covering a band in the moment, and we happen to hate them, we're like, God, how could anything be worse than this shit? And then like 3 or 4 months later, we tend to forget about it.
Yeah, let that rosy retrospection kick in.
Like, I'll tell you, like, I think they're one of the worst for sure. But in terms of the artists that pissed me off the most when I was listening to their music, I can think of 2 that are clearly objectively worse. One is some of Trace Cyrus's solo material.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Ashland High.
Yep.
That is like, just guys, go look up Ashland High right
You're right.
now.
I forgot about that.
Those albums were self-released for a reason. Like,
that was some of the worst garbage I've ever heard.
Like, it is straight up unlistenable music. And then, but that wasn't the worst one for me. For me, the worst one, and like this barely counts, but the music that absolutely fucked with my head the most during the time when we were covering it was Allison Gold. Like, I love Chinese food. Like, I swear to God, that like ruined my life for a brief period.
It's hard to count them though, because
I know, no. Like, yeah, she was 12 years old. All those songs were being written by a creepy, manipulative guy named Pato. It's like, I'm not saying Allison Gold's a bad person or anything. Like, it's not her fault, but just those products as they exist in the ecosystem right now are like demonstrably worse than anything Chad could hope to write.
My Nickelback rant, you seeing how much they piss me off, I think is a glimpse into my soul. Because I think other people, it's not going to have the same effect. They're not going to see it as bad as I do.
No, not for sure. And, it's worth noting. Recently, I put out a poll on our Instagram page. I asked people, is Nickelback the worst band we've ever covered? And 69% of our followers who voted said no.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't really follow up with like, who is the worst or if people even have an answer, but I put out an earlier poll like months ago, like before we even did Nickelback, that asked Creed versus Nickelback, who's worse? And Creed won that one. So
now that surprises me.
Yeah.
That surprises me a bit because it's got to be that they just really, really hate Scott Stapp. Because Tremonti's he's a good guitar player. Yeah. And those early albums are not awful by any stretch of the word.
No. I think with Creed, it's that people still think that they're like a Christian band, and also Scott Stapp just being an absolute douche in real life. Which Chad Kroeger is a little bit, but not as publicly. We'll get into that maybe later on in this series. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And one other thing before we kind of get into today's episode, in our last episode, you made this analogy of Nickelback's music. You compared it to chicken strips.
Yep.
And I still like that analogy a lot. And it brought to mind this one interview I read with Chad. He was interviewed by Men's Health magazine in 2012. And toward the end of that interview, Chad claims that, like, a lot of people like say they hate Nickelback, but they actually come to our concerts. And he calls them, quote, the world's biggest guilty pleasure. And then the interviewer says, kind of like laughs along with that and says, like, yeah, you guys are like the McDonald's of rock. And Chad seems to approve of this analogy. He says, yeah, man, I'll take that title. The McDonald's of rock. I like it.
Wow.
I don't know. What do you think of that?
He knows what he is, and he knows his audience. I guess I like that. He's accepted it, and he's leaning into it.
This is one thing I hear from Nickelback fans. It's like, well, they never claimed that they are these musical geniuses. And I think to some extent that's true. I mean, Chad is kind of full of himself. He does think his band is legitimately great, but he also maybe kind of understands that they are a commercial pop product too.
He knows what they're great at specifically. Yeah, they're great in a sense of the word.
Yeah, like they're not groundbreaking like the, Beatles in 67.
Yep.
But whether or not Nickelback deserves to be called the worst band ever or the McDonald's of rock, there's no denying that they occupy a unique space in our cultural consciousness. Most people have been conditioned to associate Nickelback's very name with ridicule, and the band has been publicly humiliated in ways that simply have no parallel. Consider the following anecdotes. In 2011, Nickelback was slated to play the halftime show of an NFL Thanksgiving game between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Detroit fans were so offended by this choice of music that they launched a petition to stop Nickelback from playing. That petition garnered over 51,000 signatures.
And keep in mind, this is a city that let Kid Rock do a halftime show.
I think that was part of it. It's like they would rather have Kid Rock because at least he's from that area, quote unquote.
Kid Rock is going to shout the names of the cities, and when he says Detroit, I get to cheer. And that alone puts him ahead of Nickelback.
Or how about this one? In 2016, the police department of Kensington, British Columbia, posted a warning to would-be drunk drivers on Facebook. The warning stated that anyone picked up for a DUI, in addition to facing criminal charges, would also be forced to listen to Nickelback's Silver Side Up in the squad car as they were hauled off to jail.
You know, for the average DUI offender, is that a punishment? I feel like there's an overlap.
Be like, no fear, no doubt,
Yeah.
all in. Yeah, bottoms up, baby.
Yeah.
Let's hit another bar. You know, it's funny, Cal. The one and only time I was arrested, it was when I was 17 and I got picked up for weed. So I was stoned out of my mind. And in the squad car, the cop had Bob Marley on. I'm not kidding. So, like, for a brief moment, I was actually kind of vibing.
Yeah, this isn't so bad.
And the Nickelback controversy has even made its way onto the floor of Congress. In 2019, during a debate over an election reform bill, Wisconsin Democrat Mark Pocan compared the unpopularity of a gerrymandering provision to that of Chad Kroeger's band, prompting a response from Republican Rodney Davis, who apparently is a Nickelback fan. Let's take a listen.
I would just like to add, in 2016, when the census and the Federal Register asked for comment on this, 77,000 people did comment. Only 4 wanted to keep this provision. Everyone else wanted to change this. Out of 77,000, that's probably about the percent of people who think Nickelback is their favorite band in this country. It's pretty low. And I think if you look at Nickelback's your favorite band, I apologize to the gentleman.
Why would you criticize one of the greatest bands of the 90s?
Wow. All right. One more reason why there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Clearly.
This guy likes fucking Nickelback.
Yeah, so I love it because, Mark Pocan is actually our congressman.
Right.
Like, he represents, like, Madison, essentially. And I, way back in the day, actually worked on his campaign for a bit. So I've met him a couple of times. So it's kind of cool to have, like, this, like, cool, hip, progressive Democrat, like, on our side. And then some, like, putsy, like,
Some
Republican.
Nickelback loving Republican.
It's almost too perfect. But yeah, man, like, just when you've reached that level where, like,
Politicians are using you as a punchline.
yeah,
It's well, I think this is what comes with the level of popularity they achieved.
mm-hmm.
You know, you're not going to hear this joke about Trace Cyrus, even though he's worse, because not like almost no one's listened to that album.
Yeah, like fortunately, it's Nickelback has this weird position of they are so well known and so well disliked, which is what makes this whole debate and this whole series so fascinating.
It's a lot like a Kardashian or something right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I said this in episode 1. It's
Yeah,
everyone talks about how much they hate the fucking Kardashians, but someone's keeping them on the TV.
oh, for sure. Like, in many cases, it might be the same people who say they hate them.
Yep.
So today we're going to step back a bit and try and figure out just how things got to this point. This episode won't be so much about Nickelback's music as it is about the discourse surrounding the band, both the bad and the good. We're going to be doing 2 things here. In the first half, we'll attempt to trace a history of how Nickelback became the ultimate bad music meme. And then later on, we'll flip it to the other side and share our exclusive Polishing Turds survey of Nickelback fandom, where the band's most diehard supporters tell us just what it is they like about these guys. All right, Cal, this is going to be super fun. We're going to be kind of going off in a lot of different directions today, but is there anything in particular you're curious about when it comes to either Nickelback memedom or Nickelback fandom?
Not in particular. I think you all have heard my theories. I guess I'm just excited to see if there's any truth behind any of them. And I feel a bit like Jane Goodall observing the apes. I just want to take it all in.
This is an anthropological exercise for sure.
Yes.
All right, well, without further ado, let's get into this. Who was the first person to hate Nickelback? Perhaps it was a lonely Alberta trucker who got handed a copy of Hesher and thought it sucked. Perhaps it was a stripper at the Nash who had the misfortune of being hit on by the band. Or maybe it was Chad's stepfather after he finally realized he'd never get that $4,000 loan back. We may never know the answer. But the point is, in the early days, such haters were few and far between. Back in the late 90s, Nickelback was worse than a punchline, worse than a meme. They were irrelevant. All right, so basically for the next section of today's episode, I'm going to give you a rough timeline of, I think, the key moments in the history of what turned an otherwise just like moderately successful rock band into a national punchline.
Sure.
I think it kind of starts, as we said in episode 1, in 1999, when the band is signed to Roadrunner Records. And that is a label that's mostly known for metal acts. And Nickelback is the first, like, decidedly non-metal thing that they ever put on that label. And I don't think they regret it because they made a shit ton of money off of Nickelback. But some people were kind of pissed off. And that included some of the artists on Roadrunner, most notably Slipknot and their lead singer, Corey Taylor. So this is a quote from 2002. Corey is being interviewed by some magazine, and he says, quote, "I'm glad they could use our money to make fucking Nickelback happy. That's a very, very bitter subject for me. And if I ever see any of those fuckers, it's going to be brutal."
Corey Taylor is kind of a chode, in my opinion.
I know, that's such a Corey-like quote. Like,
I know.
it's going to be brutal. Fuck them.
I hate basic rules of business.
Like,
Economies piss me off.
like, first of all, like, Slipknot was not doing poorly back then. It's
No.
not like they completely ignored them. Like, that record went platinum.
Well, and I guess I'm not clear what he's upset about. That the label gave any money at all to Nickelback, who was making them a lot of it. That doesn't make sense to you, Corey?
I think, like, in his mind, like, they should have been giving more resources to
Slipknot.
to pushing Slipknot when they were giving all that to push Nickelback. But just, and like, maybe he's got some legitimacy there. Like, I don't know all the ins and outs of this situation, but just look at the situation on paper. Like, look what, it's not immediately obvious that a metal band made up of 9 guys who wear creepy masks is going to be a platinum selling band. Whereas a band like Nickelback, who's very middle of the road, writes pop songs about, breakups and shit, like, it's no surprise that they were going to do well.
Well, and Corey should just count his blessings anyway. I mean, he's in the, probably the top, 5% of earning metal bands of all time.
Absolutely.
So what's his problem here? I don't understand.
So this beef over time gets very bitter and very childish on both sides. I'm not going to cover it super hard.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine Chad Kroeger and Corey Taylor having an adult debate.
No, like, they both have said some, like, just super, like, middle schooly things about each other. And it's beyond stupid. But then, of course, in 2001, How You Remind Me comes out. And, like, as we said, like, this song was the #1 played song of any genre in 2002. It was just an absolute beyond smash success. And obviously it just, like, it catapults Nickelback to the very forefront of music. And I've kind of seen a lot of interviews where band members kind of imply that this is where things started to go downhill for them in terms of their public reputation. The argument is that, like, people saw how successful they were, and there was a backlash because people were just jealous of them or felt the need to cut them down a peg.
There's probably some truth to that. I think it would have been a little less the case if the rest of that album was better.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. That song on its own is not terrible.
Yeah.
But if you bought Silver Side Up based on that, or if you're another artist looking at Silver Side Up, you know that this isn't a complete package or a great artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of know, you're like, these guys they sold out before they even had.
Yeah, they sold out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's no, I get that, especially from other bands. I don't know if Ordinary People felt that way, but maybe, like, if you see something blow up to that level and, like, you just, like, I haven't heard enough from you yet to justify this. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
But then in May of 2003, a major catalyst for Nickelback hatred came unintentionally in the form of a joke. During an episode of the Comedy Central show Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn, panelists discussed a recent study that connected violent lyrics to violent acts, prompting comedian Brian Posehn to make this quip.
No one talks about the studies that show that bad music makes people violent. Like Nickelback makes me want to kill Nickelback.
I love some Brian Posehn.
He is super dope, and like in addition to being a great comedian, like also a huge metalhead.
Yep.
And maybe this had something to do with like why he singled out Nickelback.
He had a couple good joke metal songs.
Yeah.
He has an album now called Grandpa Metal that I would not recommend. But before that, he was making good joke metal songs.
Nice. Well, he told that joke, and that was like innocent enough. It's not the most savage Nickelback joke we've ever heard, but apparently what happened is Comedy Central took that little clip and they used it as a promo for that show. So that joke basically ran as a promo for several months, and it just kind of got ingrained in people's heads. Like, this is before the internet, before
Right.
social media is a major thing. People are watching TV and commercials a lot, and everyone who was a regular viewer of Comedy Central kind of watched that and got it into their heads like, oh, Nickelback is a thing that people make fun of.
Yeah, the weird guy from Just Shoot Me told me. I know it's not cool now.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have argued that like this was like a big event in getting that ball rolling. But then I also think that another major catalyst for this was when Nickelback came out with All the Right Reasons in 2005. Now, why do I say that? Well, it was their best-selling album. It's a major landmark for their career, but it had two of their memeiest songs ever. And of course, I'm talking about Photograph and Rockstar.
Yeah, if you want people to stop talking about how much they hate you for being insincere, you don't have those two songs as your next singles.
No, because like they're super memorable. Like, you know immediately what they're about. Everyone knows the lyrics to Rockstar. Everyone knows the lyrics to Photograph. They stand out so much more than the rest of the band's discography and even the rest of rock music at that time. But that came at a price. And of course, like, not just in terms of how like dorky the songs are, but how many Photograph memes have you seen?
Oh God, endless. It's still to this day.
like my all-time favorite is the one where like on one half of the panel you have Cell from Dragon Ball Z firing up a Kamehameha, and on the right half of the panel it's Chad blocking it with the Photograph.
I like that GIF I saw of it keeps zooming in on the photograph, and it's just him holding up the photograph. So it's like it's like a fractal. It's like endless.
Fractal, or
go
like,
into this
like
tunnel of Chad.
Photograph inception.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So those songs, I think, were really important in making the band a meme, but also I think in a weird way they saved the band's career. Because before that, they were just another shitty post-grunge band, and they could have died out like Puddle of Mud or Default or Chevelle or any of those other shitty bands.
Yeah, I mean, as you already alluded to, it's almost better to be the most hated band in the world than an irrelevant one. Because
absolutely.
This keeps him, this meme cycle keeps him in the public consciousness.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Dark Horse comes out, and the subject matter of Nickelback's music just keeps getting dumber and dumber and dumber. I mean, you get songs like Something in Your Mouth, Burn It to the Ground, SEX, which we'll talk about in our next episode. And like by this point, as we've mentioned, the reviewers are just skewering this band.
Well, it's too easy. It's fun to do.
Yeah.
The first thing you do when you hear an album like Dark Horse is run and tell all your friends, I just did this. Like, how bad it is and how funny it is because it's so bad.
It's like, oh my God, he's actually talking about rolling around in Jell-O.
Yeah.
But I think what really pushed Nickelback into the reputational abyss was the rise of internet culture in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And this kind of made it possible for people to joke about Nickelback, to think about Nickelback, to talk about Nickelback in contexts that were outside of any direct musical experience.
Mhm.
So it's like you're not thinking about Nickelback because they came on at a bar. You're thinking about it because you're scrolling through Facebook like we all do, and someone just posted a Nickelback meme, which you started to see around this time.
Absolutely. Even that clip I used in episode 1's cold open.
Mm-hmm.
All I did was type Nickelback sucks into YouTube and found some guy
Yeah.
singing about it.
And you could have picked probably like 12 different ones if
Yeah.
you wanted, right?
Yep.
It's like, I just started to see this from people who I didn't even think were interested in music, really. It's like one that I remember was a flow chart of what should I have for breakfast this morning? And then the next question is, do you like Nickelback? No. Drink orange juice. Yes. Battery acid. Like, another one was on Facebook, like a list of friends you should delete right now. And it's a link. Click on the link, and it's just like the list of your friends on Facebook who like Nickelback. And then in one of the major examples of this is in 2010, there is a Facebook group called Can This Pickle Get More Likes Than Nickelback? Do you remember this one at all, Cal?
I do not.
I think I actually might have liked this page back in the day. But at the time, Nickelback had about 1.4 million likes on Facebook. But within a couple of weeks of this pickle group starting up, they beat Nickelback. They actually did get more likes than arguably the biggest band in the world at that time.
That is peak internet culture right there.
It actually got to the point where Chad Kruger kind of responded to them via direct message.
That's the number one mistake you can make.
Yeah. So I don't, supposedly there's a screenshot of this. I haven't been able to find it, so I can't confirm this is real. But supposedly Chad contacted the creator of the page and told them, like, haha, funny, your page will be closing in 2 weeks.
I don't like you and your stupid pickle.
So, old man yells at cloud kind of thing.
No, that's called the Streisand effect, and it's named after when something Barbara Streisand didn't like was on the internet, and she went out of her way to try and get it shut down, and it just amplified it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name for that term. It's you never get involved in shit like this if you're the target of it.
No.
Just let it go away.
And it's been like kind of a long ride for Nickelback of learning how to deal with their own hatred. And we'll kind of see in a little bit where they land with that. And just generally, from what I can gather, it really feels like this mass, like, public vilification of Nickelback, in my personal opinion, I think it kind of peaked in the early 2010s. Like, in terms of the articles that start to pop up around then of like why Nickelback sucks and all the like anecdotes of like people doing crazy things that are related to Nickelback or talking about Nickelback in spaces like the NFL where like you normally don't think about Nickelback. This is when it kind of reaches a fever pitch. So here are some of like anecdotes that kind of support that idea. So in August of 2011, the newspaper Winnipeg Free Press published an editorial begging the National Hockey League to disinvite Nickelback from performing at the inaugural game of the Winnipeg Jets hockey team. So this is a major event in the like Canadian hockey world because the Winnipeg Jets were like a popular hockey team that they had for a while, and they left the city in the 90s and then came back in 2011. So it was a major deal for this big hockey town to get its hockey team back. And Nickelback was supposed to play at the ceremony that honored this. And it's not just like some rando. It's like the newspaper editors are demanding that they not play a band that's from the state, next door.
Right.
Like they're like a hometown team.
Can't we get Rush or somebody?
So here's an actual quote from the editorial. The return of the NHL to Winnipeg is something we have been dreaming about for 15 years. Please do not sully the celebration with the presence of a band whose existence is antithetical to the very concept of celebration.
Holy shit. That is a skewering for like a major newspaper to say something like that.
And are Nickelback antithetical to the very concept of celebration? Well, not if you're celebrating, doing shots of JD and like leering at a stripper in a bar.
Yeah. I feel like their music is party music if that's your scene.
Yeah. And then, we have the aforementioned event at the NFL game. This was when the NFL does a game on Thanksgiving every year. It's always the Detroit Lions against somebody
for God knows what reason.
Yeah, exactly. For people who are not into football, the Lions are like the abjectly worst team of our lifetime in the NFL. So Nickelback was supposed to perform this show, and this petition was supposedly launched by a Detroit fan who wanted a local artist to play instead of Nickelback. And Detroit has a lot of legendary artists that have come out of that, like Bob Seger and like all the Motown artists, all the greats of Detroit music. But 51,000 people signed this petition. We don't know how many of them were from Detroit. Probably not that many, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was mostly trolls. But Nickelback played anyway, and they only played one song, and that song ended up being When We Stand Together.
God damn it.
So,
what a weird choice. Like, why wouldn't you just pick one of your easy going bangers everyone knows?
I know, like, I feel like for that audience, you would want to do like Burn It to the Ground.
Yeah,
or
like
something
Animals.
Like yeah, like maybe they'd change their mind if like they realize like, oh, these guys are just as thick and boneheaded as the rest of us.
Right.
But no, they do, they play When We Stand Together, and you can tell that people in the crowd are booing. If you watch like some of the webcam videos or like cell phone videos that people are taking on YouTube, like it's clear that like people are not into it. It's a very awkward thing to watch.
So in a way, they are standing together against Nickelback.
It's 2 minutes hate
yes.
for all the Detroit audience. But then in January 2012, you have something that I think must have hurt Chad a little bit more personally because it came from a fellow musician. So this is when the drummer for the Black Keys, a guy named Patrick Carney, was doing an interview with Rolling Stone, and he took the opportunity to really just kind of throw Nickelback under the bus. So this is a quote from that interview. He says, "Rock and roll is dying because people became okay with Nickelback being the biggest band in the world. So they became okay with the idea that the biggest band in the world is always going to be shit."
Ooh.
So yeah, that's
that would sting.
That's pretty harsh, like especially because normally fellow musicians I feel are like diplomatic and circumspect about these kind of things.
As much as I hate Nickelback, I don't really agree with what he's saying.
No,
I think rock and roll has just kind of left the public eye. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that the biggest one became Nickelback. I also think he has cause and effect switched here.
Well, expound about that. What do you mean, Cal?
Well, so he's saying rock and roll is dying because of Nickelback, and I think it's the opposite. Nickelback exists because rock is dying. I don't think they caused it. I think people have stopped valuing our artistic rock and artistic integrity and rebellion in rock.
And this is all that's left.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think you're totally onto something, Cal. Take it back to like the 70s where a band like Yes, or King's X could sell millions of records.
I actually just listened to Fragile on my way back up from Florida, and all I could think the whole time was like, how did this sell?
That sold like as well as Nickelback at a point, and that's an incredible thing to think about. This is very complex, not radio friendly, incredibly progressive, intricate music that like general audiences liked. It's like mind numbing to think about how that would play now. And Nickelback is clearly the opposite of that, even though some people think Feed the Machine is somehow prog. But it's just a generational shift. People like different things about music. there's more different kinds of music available now. Like hip hop wasn't a thing back in the 70s. Like R&B wasn't a thing. And the rock and roll audience is aging out and becoming more centered around like older white males who are the centerpiece of Nickelback's audience.
Right. I mean, this is like an old jazz man lamenting that jazz has gone to shit. Like, it's, dude, that's what happens over time.
Yeah, like things age out. Like one day when we're old enough, like hip hop is going to die out in favor of whatever the fuck it comes to replace it. You know, it's just, I don't, as much as Cal and I both hate Nickelback, I don't think they're responsible in a meaningful way for the decline of rock and roll.
No, not even a little.
I think Chad had to have been a little hurt by this, but the band responded by tweeting like a little like kind of snarky, "Thanks to the drummer in the Black Keys calling us the biggest band in the world."
Okay.
Yeah.
They should just have not said anything, but whatever.
Yeah. And then later on, Patrick Carney kind of half apologized for this. He claimed that he didn't mean to single Nickelback out. And then he said, quote, "There's much worse bands than Nickelback, maybe."
It's like, I can't name any, but I'm sure they're out there.
It's like, what about Theory of a Dead Man? What about Puddle of Mud? I think there are much worse bands than Nickelback.
When you specifically name someone, you are singling them out, though. I don't think you can do that and then go back and be like, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah. I don't know. Interviews can be tricky. It's like when Billy Ray Cyrus was interviewed by GQ and he ended up like just completely dunking on Disney at a time where he was still making money from them. Like it's just sometimes you say shit you shouldn't say. And then lastly, we're going back to politics again. This is one that I found funny. In September of 2012, the mayor of Chicago had to publicly clarify that he did not like Nickelback.
That's a scandal right up there with like, I did not accept bribes from so-and-so. Or like,
this is the mayor of like one of America's most corrupt cities. And like, this is like Rahm Emanuel, like he was a very corrupt guy in general. He had a lot of scandals. So for this to be like on the list of things people would care about says something.
This guy took money from charities. He's cheated on his wife. He's been all over all sorts of things. And he also likes Nickelback.
Fuck him. So this was at a time when there's this really bitter dispute between the city of Chicago and the Chicago Teachers Union, who were on strike at the time. They were trying to negotiate a new deal. And during one of the teachers' demonstrations, a protester held a sign that read, "Rahm Emanuel likes Nickelback." Like, you know, there were other ones in the crowd that like Rahm Emanuel hates kids. Like, you know, Rahm Emanuel is a jerk. But like, this is the one that got people's attention.
That guy needs a high five. That is so funny.
For sure. And so obviously this went viral. And, you know, some reporter must have asked the mayor's office if Rahm Emanuel really does like Nickelback. And the spokesperson replied via email, one word: "No."
That's funny too, because like they always tend to say things like "no comment" or whatever, but he was willing to take a stand on this one.
Yeah, so like whatever you say about Rahm Emanuel, at least he read the room on that one. For the most part, all of these anecdotes were like mainly focused on the band's music, or, you know, at least some other aspect of the band, like maybe even Chad's hair. But
I know I rip on his hair a lot.
Yeah, like if he had ramen hair in the photograph video. How do you not make fun of that?
He looks like a wet dog, like all the time.
But then there's this one incident that happened in 2013, and this is a big scandal mainly in Canada, but it's one of the few instances of something the band actually did that got them in trouble. And this episode centers around actually a charity relief concert. So let me give you some context. In June of 2013, the Canadian province of Alberta, where Nickelback's from, they experienced unprecedented rainfall. There was massive flooding. It displaced over 100,000 people and caused $5 billion in damage. And so later on in the summer, they some people organized this big relief concert, as you see occasionally, and some of the biggest names in Canadian music were there. I can't name a lot of them off the top of my head, but there are a lot of guys who were big in Canada. And of course, Nickelback was the headliner of that event because they were the biggest name in Canadian music. And of course, like Live Aid or anything else like that, this concert was televised. So, okay, fine and good so far.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was all these bands had to sign a release to get the footage of the concert played on the airwaves, on TV. And for whatever reason, Nickelback did not sign the release that would allow the TV broadcasters to air their portion of the performance.
See, that is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean,
this is your Bono moment, Chad. Like, if you want people to believe all the bullshit in your sappier songs, this was your chance.
That's true. If there was ever a moment where you would expect the band to play When We Stand Together, that is like them actually finally living up to that. But, so they played the show, and I'm sure the people in the crowd enjoyed it. But for the people who were watching that concert on TV, and this is like one of those shows where like there's like a 1-800 or whatever the Canadian equivalent is, like call to donate $5, flashing at the bottom of the screen. People at home are watching this concert, and then right before Nickelback's supposed to come on, it just ends. Like it goes back to Red Green or whatever else they're watching.
Has he ever explained this? What
No.
his problem was?
No, they like,
because this makes no business sense at all.
I guess like if you're viewing it from a business perspective, maybe the argument is like you're giving away your intellectual property for free, or maybe you're worried that it's going to depress turnouts at the actual concerts.
Yeah, but I mean, think of the PR that you get for this.
Yeah, whatever benefit there was to this, if there is any, was massively swept away by the cost. Like Nickelback was just pilloried for this. Like newspapers all over Canada were just completely ripping on them for this event, and it blew up on Twitter, and it caused a lot of ill will, even at a time when people, like as we said, were already primed to hate Nickelback. So this is just a really bad move.
Maybe Chad can't read. That's my new pet theory.
I don't even know if this is Chad's fault. Like it could have been something that the managers insisted on. He just didn't think to override them. There's never been a good explanation for why this happened.
Yeah, no, it's a genuinely baffling one.
But as our old friend Billy Ray Cyrus likes to say, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And in recent years, it feels like the cultural discourse around Nickelback has pulled back a bit from the fever-pitched hatred of the early 2010s. And I've noticed that over the past decade, an increasing number of writers have begun to question whether the mass public hatred of Nickelback is justified. Call it the era of Nickelback revisionism. And so, this is kind of the point where you start to see articles like, are Nickelback really that bad? Or I think it was Spin put out an article that said 5 Nickelback songs that don't suck.
I think they have 5 songs that don't suck.
Yeah, they
exactly 5. I think that's about as many as I can think of.
Yeah, roughly. I think they have a little bit more than that. There's maybe 3 to 4 that I genuinely like. But yeah, I just feel like critics are, maybe they're getting bored of constantly shitting on Nickelback, or maybe they're starting to feel bad for them because they've been piling it on so intensely for the past few years. But you just start to see people be more interested in why people hate Nickelback than why Nickelback sucks. So they're essentially doing what we are doing with this series, is starting with Nickelback's shitty music and pulling it out and getting more into Nickelback the phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting subject because their music is so fucking basic that the fact that they became the band that sucks, that even square politicians are referencing them as that band that sucks. Something weird is going on here, and it's interesting.
Absolutely. One of the articles that I think does a good job of articulating the spirit of this is a 2013 article by music critic Stephen Hayden. And so while he was reviewing the band's greatest hits album, Hayden writes, "Hating Nickelback is the last form of pop music monoculture. It's understood in our culture that hating Nickelback isn't really a debatable musical opinion. It's like arguing that Miley Cyrus is crazy or Kim Kardashian is dumb."
I really like that quote because it encapsulates kind of what the internet has done in recent years. I mean, this is the thing. We all kind of like naturally group ourselves into people who think this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're this, you do this and post about this. And if you didn't have the internet, you might have pockets of people in the South that still dig Creed. And Creed would be making new albums.
Yeah.
But we all, are able now to get together. And once these people down here see, the general public, the people in the know think Creed sucks.
It's like, I'm not supposed to like this.
Yeah, now I can't like it.
It's like, it allowed Nickelback's audience to become self-conscious about it in a way that they weren't before. I mean, it clearly didn't kill the Nickelback because they still have a gigantic audience. Like, they still have they still sell out every tour that they do, but they've never reached the level that they reached during the peak of How You Remind Me or Photograph or anything like that. So it's hard to assess how much the backlash against Nickelback affected their career prospects, because on the one hand, like, they're not selling as many records as they did, for all the right reasons, but also no rock band sells that many records anymore.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I think it helped them more than it hurt them.
Yeah.
I think if your name is known, whether it's good or bad, you're going to move more units than some band no one's heard of yet.
I saw one interview with Chad Kroeger where he basically acknowledged, like, just what you said, is that, like, at first he used to hate how much the band gets, like, shat on and how much random strangers were calling him a dickhead. But then he kind of realized that it was keeping them relevant. And he said, well, without the hatred, we'd just be another Green Day. Like, they'd just be around, essentially.
That's fair.
Like, making shitty music, but nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
So in this article, Stephen Hayden goes on to clarify that he does, in fact, genuinely hate Nickelback, but unlike most people, at least he bothered to listen to a good portion of their music.
I think we can include ourselves in this camp now.
So, like, we can legitimately shit on Nickelback, but there are, like, a lot of people probably out there that have heard 5 Nickelback songs and concluded that they suck.
None of you guys are allowed to talk your shit till you go through what we went through. That's your rite of passage.
Walk a mile in our shoes. Listen to those 9 albums, and if you can get out of that without ending up in a mental asylum, like, talk to us. It's
basically the same runtime as, like, all 3 Lord of the Rings. Yeah. It's just way less fun.
So Hayden argues that as bad as Nickelback is, there are other bands out there that are much more worthy of the level of scorn that Nickelback engenders. And he specifically cited the bands Seether and Buckcherry.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I do understand this argument of the revisionist era that Nickelback was disproportionately shit on.
Yes.
Because I totally agree. There are other bands that are just as terrible out there.
Yeah, and in fact, almost every band from the specific scene that Nickelback came out of, the post-grunge era, like,
they all suck.
That was a really awful era for music. You had, like, Creed was one of the better bands of that scene.
Yep.
You also had Puddle of Mud and like Default and, like, just bands that are so forgettable. Like, we wouldn't even be able to think of what to say about their music.
No, there's literally like a 5-year window of kids who grew up between like 83 and 88 that even know these bands' names.
Yeah, that was a rough time to be, like, a rock fan of, specifically when we were teens and, like, discovering stuff like Nirvana or, in my case, Radiohead. So knowing that good rock can exist and yet VH1 and MTV are putting out this shit.
Yeah.
It's just like, I could never wrap my head around, like, Led Zeppelin exists. Like, why are you making this? Even Greta Van Fleet makes sense to me in a way, because as, like, hacky as they are, at least they're imitating good artists. Like, putting out a good product by virtue of the fact that they're copy pasting something that was good. So ultimately, Haydn asserts that when most people say they hate Nickelback, they don't actually hate the band itself so much as what Nickelback signifies. He writes again, quote, "The most damning charge leveled against the band is that its ascension in the 2000s correlated with the marginalization of rock music in greater pop culture. There's a credible argument that the opposite is true, that a band that released 4 consecutive albums that won at least triple platinum waved rock's tattered flag with the most vigor during a period of questionable relevance." So again, what he's essentially saying is that, like, you're saying that Nickelback killed rock and roll, but Nickelback was actually one of the last truly successful rock bands.
Yeah.
And I think he's right.
I totally agree. That's a better way to put what I was getting at earlier.
Yeah.
Nickelback didn't kill it. They're just waving the tattered flag around. They're what's left.
I think when it's all said and done, we might end up like culturally remembering Nickelback as one of the last great quote unquote classic rock bands. Even though like our generation might have problems with that label, like if you can imagine a world where rock just doesn't exist at all, for people who aren't familiar with the nuances of the genre, they'll hear Nickelback and not really be able to distinguish it, between that and the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin or
I could see that.
AC/DC.
They're not going to get why we hate it so much because they weren't there.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I've heard, and this comes from Chad himself, so take it with a grain of salt, but they tour around the world. They play a lot of European countries, and they're big there too. And these are countries where sometimes they don't even have rock and roll stations. Like, rock and roll is so far removed from like the average European's taste that like something like Nickelback is a novelty, and it might be the only exposure to rock and roll they have.
It's like when you go see the polka band at the German restaurant. You have no clue if it's good polka, but you're like, all right.
So yeah, it's
this
like,
is new.
oh, cool, it's an accordion. I can kind of dance to this. Yeah, great. So like maybe they kept the genre alive rather than killing it. And then finally, Haydn argues that by 2013, the band's status as the stand-in for all bad music had begun to fade, the torch having been passed to bands like the Chainsmokers and Imagine Dragons.
Fuck Imagine Dragons.
We'll have to cover them at some point.
It has to be done.
Yeah,
I hate them so much.
I think they're an interesting one to talk about, but I'll have to save that. So almost wistfully, Haydn writes, "Nickelback is still inarguably a big-time rock band, but it feels like the Nickelback we all used to know, the one that signified unseemly truths about our culture, the one we therefore relished hating, is gone forever." And what I find interesting is that he's noticing that people aren't piling on Nickelback as much as they used to. But that article was written in 2013. That was a year before they came out with No Fixed Address. This is the album that is so fucked up that even Nickelback fans don't really like it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one with Edge of a Revolution and
Right.
She Keeps Me Up. And that's kind of tragic because those songs deserve to be dunked on, in my opinion, more than Photograph or Rockstar. Because that Edge of a Revolution is shit.
Yeah.
That's one of the dumbest songs I've ever heard in my life. But people didn't care because by that point, people just forgotten about Nickelback.
Right. It's like later Billy Cyrus.
Yeah. It's like, no, guys, they put out so much more bad stuff than you realize.
You don't have to be done making fun of them.
And yeah. So I think that's kind of where we're at today is people don't talk about Nickelback as much, but when you do see articles about Nickelback or YouTube videos about Nickelback, they kind of have a more neutral to positive tone or kind of an apologetic way of saying like, okay, they weren't that bad.
Yeah. It's all, we don't like them. We're not going to be brave enough to go say we like it.
Yeah. Some people do. Some people genuinely say that they like them, but for most people, it's like, oh, they're not as bad as we thought, And I think as far as Nickelback themselves go, they've learned to kind of live with the hatred that they've engendered. Like it's definitely caused them a lot of pain, even if they won't admit it as much. I saw one interview where Mike Kruger, Chad's brother, the bassist, says that his school-age children get made fun of because their dad is in Nickelback. That sucks. I feel genuinely bad for him on that front. And if you're a school-age child listening to this podcast, don't make fun of someone whose dad is in a shitty band.
Yeah, it's not his fault.
Like, that fucked up Miley Cyrus. I'm sure that's going to fuck up, like, Mike Kruger's kids. But then again, like, they've come to kind of embrace it. They realize that it keeps their name in the papers.
Yep.
And, there's no such thing as bad press, essentially.
If they announced a comeback tour, I bet they'd still sell shit out.
They absolutely would. Like, because they've toured as recently as, like, right before COVID started. Like, they're planning to tour again later this year. They're probably going to release another album in the next 2 to 3 years. And their audience may be, like, older, but they're not going to die off anytime soon. They've got at least, if they really want to, like, another 20 years of feeding off the same people they've already cultivated.
Right.
They could make a handsome living off of
they
that.
can enter the AC/DC era and
Yeah.
just keep writing the same fucking album over and over and touring it.
And then I bet by then, even people who hated Nickelback growing up will watch them just out of pure nostalgia, or because that's the last rock band that exists.
You're right.
You know?
I'm not going to go, but I could see what you're talking about.
Because eventually Keith Richards and Mick Jagger will die.
Yes.
And we'll have to have that one band that is always touring no matter what. Okay, so now that we've explored all the ways Nickelback has been hated, how about we talk about those who actually love them? It's time to reveal the results of the exclusive survey we've been teasing about since this series began. So this is the Polishing Turds Nickelback Fan Survey. And basically what we did was we took an 8-question survey and we posted it a couple places, but mainly the Facebook group Nickel Posting, which is like a big Nickelback fan page, and the r/Nickelback subreddit. And we got about like 24 responses altogether. So like some good diversity in what people have said. And I just want to like just real quick thank everyone who responded in the survey and both of those pages for hosting us and for letting us pull their
basically and rag on your
supporters.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you actually are one of the people that answered this and have made it this far in the series with all the shit talking we've done,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, actually, like in particular, I want to thank a guy named Brandon Din. He is the admin of the Nickel Posting page on Facebook, and he like actively supported this project. Kind of, he filled out our survey. He let it get posted on Nickel Posting, and when I posted episode 1, he actually said that he liked it. Like, even though he knew that we were gonna shit on his favorite band, so he's been very cool about this whole thing.
Well, as mean as we've been, I like to think we've been fair.
Yeah, we have, and these fans must know that most people who talk shit about Nickelback are not fair.
Right.
So
They're used to mindless abuse.
to have guys like us even say, "Oh, we like a couple of their songs," that's like manna for them.
Holy
like,
shit.
Oh my god.
Holy shit, I'm not alone.
So here are the 8 questions that constitute the survey. Number 1, how long have you been a fan of Nickelback? Number 2, what would you say you like most about their music? Number 3, what are your favorite albums by Nickelback? Number 4, has Nickelback gotten better or worse over time? Number 5, in your opinion, why does this band have such a generally bad reputation? Number 6, do you feel that a lot of people in the music world misunderstand Nickelback? If so, what are they not getting? Number 7, have you ever been personally teased, insulted, or trolled for professing a positive opinion of Nickelback? And finally, number 8, what other artists or genres of music do you listen to regularly? I couldn't make this as deep as like maybe I would have wanted. Like I couldn't get things like age, gender, like income level, or like just like so this isn't like as scientific as like a UW like Madison sociological survey, but like there was a lot of variance in the types of people that responded. There was a variance in like the length of the answers and like the quality of the writing of people who responded. So I feel like I got a pretty like diverse like set of opinions on this one.
Yeah. On Reddit, it's probably tough to tell, but the Facebook one,
Yeah.
you can see the person.
Yeah, I guess so I did click on a few of the profiles and got a sense of who these people were. And like it's the age ranges, about a good like 20 to 25 years or so.
Okay.
We get some very young people in there. We had some like kind of like older millennial like to possibly like Gen Xers in there. We had one guy that liked Nickelback so much, he claimed that in a span of about 14 months since he started listening on Spotify, he listened to about 75,000 minutes of Nickelback over about 14 months.
What the
Which,
fuck?
if you do the math, comes out to about 3 hours a day.
Jesus Christ.
Of Nickelback. Just
oh my
Nickelback.
God, I'm not dedicated to anything that much.
To be fair, like this kid is like 17 years old, so it's not like a grown ass man doing
Okay.
this, but still, that's fucking insane. That's almost like as long as their discography must be, I imagine. Like that's 3 hours of
That kind of
Nickelback.
reminds me of the like back when we were that age and we'd just play Halo all day and put on a whole discography of a band.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can compare it to.
Yeah, so like just God knows what he was doing while listening to like Dark Horse twice in a row, but clearly not like having sex. So we'll just kind of go question by question here. And the first one is, how long have you been a fan of Nickelback? And I think sort of unsurprisingly, most of the people kind of place it around 2001 when Silver Side Up came out.
Yep, that just makes sense.
Yeah, so that's pure nostalgia. This is when the entire world was introduced to Nickelback, and it was generally a very positive impression. So that like in that kind of ages a lot of the fan base too. So like a lot of these people, I would say broadly speaking, are kind of like older millennials. Although we did have some interesting introductions to the band. One girl claimed that it started when she was 7 years old and heard the song Someday on the Now 13 CD.
Now, for those of you who don't know, that this was like a thing in our childhood. They did these discs called Now That's What I Call Music.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like basically a compilation of things that were big that year.
Yeah, it's like whatever was big on the radio and you didn't have to censor too much, like was on the Now CD. Like
That's funny.
We had a couple of Nows in our household back then.
Yeah, I think everyone had one or two.
Yeah. So, and then another guy claimed that it was when he was 8 years old and he bought the All the Right Reasons CD, which like 8, that seems ridiculously young to start getting into music.
Yeah.
Especially for an album that has a song about getting roadhead.
Yeah. But I don't know. I was in 5th grade when I bought Offspring's Americana, and that was my first CD.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Like that's how old, like for me, that's when I started getting into music was 6th grade. I bought the Kid Rock CD.
I remember listening to that with you.
Yeah.
We've known each other that long.
Yeah. So that was a big transformational event for us, and
There's a
positive
song
and
called
negative
Fuck
way.
Off on here.
Yeah. It's like he's talking about strippers. That's cool. But yeah, so she fell in love with the band at age 8. One guy also said that he started with All the Right Reasons, but that was because he discovered it on his girlfriend's front porch. Which that's all he said. Like I kind of want more details on that. Was he walking to the house to like go out with her or like
No.
trying to get her back?
No, he's
And, like,
going over there to get laid, and then he sees the CD and gets distracted. He's like, well, this is good enough.
Yeah,
And he goes back
he
home.
drives home, is like jamming out to Animals, and he forgets all about this girl because he's got a new love of his life, Chad Kruger. One guy claimed that he started becoming a fan when he heard the song "Figured You Out" on the radio.
Yeah, I know. You know that guy's out there somewhere.
And I found that funny because Cal, you said that this is the song that made you hate Nickelback.
Yeah. Oh, I think I'll assume he's a little younger than I was when it came out.
Yeah.
I was old enough to know that this is like really shitty
Yeah.
and misogynistic and just bad. But maybe 19-year-old me or younger might have liked it.
It's like, ooh, I like the pants around your feet.
Yeah, he's singing about sex.
And then, like, finally, here's one response that I just found really odd. So this came from a guy on Reddit, and he cites a specific song. He says, quote, "I've been a fan since 2016 when I by chance heard the song The Hammer's Coming Down from No Fixed Address, which became my favorite song of all time and is still up there. I am unbelievably lucky to have heard such a great song as my first exposure to the band without knowing about their reputation, especially considering how underrated this song is." So, like, I feel like we have to play that song for you guys because I want you to hear this song, The Hammer's Coming Down, that this guy considers such a great song that he completely got into Nickelback because of it. So, let's hear it.
Beside me when the ground starts shaking, the only sound you hear is the breath we're taking. If there is one thing I can promise you, we'll see the light again. This is the calm before the coming storm. This is the red sky morning without a warning. Now this is the fight that we've been waiting for, and there's no sense in running.
Yeah, so I don't know. What do you think of that one?
I think if you're 16 and you're obsessed with Marvel movies and like being someone's hero in an apocalypse situation, I could see digging that song. I could see digging it so much it's your favorite song. I would expect as you get older and find more songs for that not to be the case. But
it really has the vibe of like that must have been in a Michael Bay movie or something.
Yeah,
like
I think
the symphonic shit, like it has that vibe. Absolutely.
I'm not as baffled as I was expecting to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, favorite of all time, little interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just like maybe if you've never heard a song with like an orchestral production in it, like, and that's the first one that attempts something like that. Hey,
I'll say too, I liked the intro.
Yeah.
It's typical with Nickelback. It's as soon as Chad starts the verse that I'm kind of like, oh yeah, it's a Nickelback song.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, but that was their weird album. Like you see very few mentions of No Fixed Address in this survey. That was one of the few ones where it's like that one had a direct impact on how they feel about the band.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we move down to the next question. What would you say you like most about Nickelback's music? And here, the people mention a lot of different things, but the most frequently mentioned things are like the quality of the production of the music, the guitar tone. A lot of people mention the lyrics, like the very thing that we hate, the directness is something that they love. And that didn't surprise me.
Yeah, that goes back to the chicken strips thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's we're looking for some, you know, artistic integrity and some something I have to think about a little bit, and they're not. They're looking for the complete opposite.
Yeah, they want a direct soundtrack to whatever they're feeling at this moment. It's same reason why like 13-year-old kids listen to emo. It's because I'm feeling this one specific thing right now, and like I need a one-to-one soundtrack for that.
There's that one Big Pop song where she goes, "This is my fight song." I don't know who it is, but it's the people who go through like a breakup or like a divorce and are really angry. They're gonna want that song.
One of the most genius songs ever written was the Happy Birthday song, because they figured out and it's still copyrighted. Like people get copyright strikes for playing that song to this day, because like it serves a very specific purpose and it has a specific niche that will never go out of style. And I bet if you like could give like Chad Kroeger, like I bet Chad Kroeger would pay like $50 million to have gone back in time and be the one to have written the Happy Birthday song, because he would love to have a monopoly on something like that. Other things people mention, the catchiness of the hooks. That one's like actually kind of legit.
Yeah.
Like Nickelback is catchy. They write hooks that get stuck in your head. A lot of people commented that they liked Chad Kroeger's voice.
Okay, to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, he has a distinct sounding voice. It's not one that I like or that Cal likes.
No, but I listen to Norwegian black metal, so
Yeah.
I can't criticize.
No, that voice is an extremely subjective thing. Like,
Yeah.
I like Billy Corgan. Like, I can't explain why. A lot of people hate Billy Corgan's voice. I happen to like, and I totally understand why somebody wouldn't. And then other things, people mentioned the quote-unquote diversity of Nickelback's music.
Okay.
And
you need to escape the realms of radio if you think Nickelback has diverse music.
it depends on your definition of diverse. If you mean diverse in the terms of like lyrical tone specifically, like the kind of band that can write a world-saving song next to a strip club anthem, next to a drinking song, next to a like I miss you, like let's not break up song, and somehow it all theoretically makes sense, then I guess Nickelback is kind of diverse. But if you mean diversity in terms of song structure and sonic elements and chord progressions, then like no.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
But I want to come back to the idea that like people like Nickelback because of the sound quality, the production of their music. Because like we both admitted, like technically from a technical standpoint, they sound really good. But is that a reason that people are liking this band? How much do you buy that, Cal?
I actually do. I don't think it's because they know about good production, but I just think with the same, I think there's an overlap with people that like Nickelback and people who like to work on like their car sound system.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do think there is a bit of I don't know. It's hard to say. I do actually buy that. That's part of why they like them.
I think it plays into it. I think it's why that helps them rise above other bands. But I don't know. Part of it feels like people who say they go to Hooters for the wings. It's like it's not a main feature of what they're doing. I wonder if like they just don't want to admit that they like the stupid catchy hooks,
right?
Or if they need a reason to like Nickelback that makes them sound smart.
All right, yeah, because when you put it that way, I get what you're saying.
It's a way of presenting an argument for Nickelback that is gonna like resonate more with hipsters, maybe.
Yeah, because has anyone actually bought a CD for the production specifically?
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, yeah, it's production's a feature of something you already like.
Mm-hmm. Like it can make or break an album.
Yeah.
But like I still can't listen to And Justice for All.
Even though
the songwriting is good on it, but I hate the lack of bass.
They fucking ruined it.
It's one of my least favorites by Metallica. I wonder how many people like this actually is the main feature of Nickelback's music, when obviously what Chad thinks is the feature is the lyrics and the hooks.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hear what some people had to say specifically. There's one girl that said, "I like the catchy lyrics that most people can relate to. They have a way of playing with words, parentheses, much like Eminem, but not on his level." And they make me feel good.
What a weird comparison to draw. You have like a master wordsmith and Chad.
It's like, yeah, no shit, they're not on Eminem's level. But like, I don't want to be too mean, but she must not have many frames of reference.
I know, that's like
if Eminem's the only rapper you can think of. Like
Nick has a way of playing basketball, kind of like Michael Jordan, but not on his level.
Yeah. And then one guy on Reddit wrote, this is a quote, the not giving a fuck raw lyrics to some of their songs. And of course, there is spelled incorrectly. Just kick back and listen.
See, that's the typical Nickelback fan I have in my head. It's just the Chad bro who's like, I like them because they don't give a fuck. And they just say what they want. And then in parentheses in his head, it's the same shit that I think.
Yeah, like these are guys that get excited when there's a sale on Natty Ice.
Yeah.
You know, and like they just want to kick back and watch a hockey game and listen to Dark Horse. And you know what? Fine, if that's your jam.
Yep. Don't let me making fun of you dissuade you.
Yeah. All right. So, and then the next question is, what are your favorite albums by Nickelback? And no surprise here, the ones that got the most mentions were Silver Side Up, All the Right Reasons, and The Long Road, followed pretty closely by Dark Horse, and also a lot of people mentioned Feed the Machine. You know, so these are kind of the more popular ones, the ones with some of the biggest hits. And of course, you had a lot of people that say they like all the Nickelback records. But interestingly, nobody directly cited No Fixed Address as their favorite album, and a few even admitted that that's kind of their weak spot.
I'm curious if did anybody mention either of the first two?
A couple people did. There were like one or two guys that mentioned The State, and a couple guys that kind of liked Curb. But the general sense I get is that people kind of write off those first two albums. Even if they might like Leader of Men, like most people are not into the band because of those two albums.
Okay.
So maybe there are like 20 OGs in Vancouver who saw the band play at a bar in 1997. It's like, I like Nickelback before they were cool.
That's what I'm saying. I'm actually, the reason I'm surprised is I'm surprised there's not a contingent of hipster Nickelback fans who claim The State is the best and they never got back there.
I'm sure they exist, but they're too like deep in some like Canadian like cabin that we can't access them.
It's like how we know the first Baha Men album's the best.
Yeah. I'm sure that like maybe those like OG Nickelback fans, like if you'd polled them in 2001, they would have proudly like proclaimed Curb as like, the real Nickelback. But then by like 2008, when this band is a joke, they're like, oh no, I never liked Nickelback.
Yeah, they can't say they liked any of them.
Yeah. So then the next question is, has Nickelback gotten better or worse over time? And here you had an interesting range of responses, but I feel like most people seem to either think they got better over time or at least have like plateaued at Silver Side Up and been consistent since then. Like, in other words, the opinion that we have that like they started out mediocre, got okay, and then got really cringy, with Dark Horse and All the Right Reasons. The Nickelback fans don't seem to think that.
Well, this is where I sort of buy the production argument. Not to go back to it, but
yeah,
that was one thing that did improve through their discography is they sounded better and better each album.
That is
I mean,
true.
The material got worse and worse, but so if you are the type of person that views music as like a soundtrack to your life, I could thinking they got better and better.
And that is when Nickelback started to try more production gimmicks. They tried to put more strings in some of their ballads. They had like kind of the occasional odd, like weird electronic break or like a phase shifter here and there, or like whatever it took to make that song interesting. Even the little rap bit in Something in Your Mouth. Like they were trying things that kept it at least sonically interesting. And clearly, like the lyrics, like people were either like ignoring that part of it or actively enjoying how like shitty those songs were on a lyrical level.
They're finally writing in a way I can understand.
Yeah. And then one thing I did see with a lot of these responses is that some people claim that the bands did start to kind of slide, like with like Dark Horse or Here and Now, but a lot of people really felt that they redeemed themselves with Feed the Machine.
I actually agree with this timeline in general. I don't redeemed themselves is a strong word.
Well,
I do think Feed the Machine was a big step up over the last like 3 they had made before that.
I agree with that. Like, in many ways it might be their best album.
Yeah.
Like, and the one where they showed the most musical promise, like maybe on anything that they've done.
I would agree with that.
And I think that was the one where they started to realize, like, we have to play to our audience and we have to like make rock music because that's what people expect of us. And I think if Nickelback makes another album in the next couple of years, I would expect that direction to kind of continue, and we'll see how far they push it in terms of making it more metal-y.
Dude, if they come out with a prog rock masterpiece out of nowhere, I will fucking, like, I don't know, I'll eat a shoe.
It's, I'm sure they could come out with something that their fans would consider a prog rock masterpiece. like I said, people think like Feed the Machine is like prog metal. Like, okay, like you guys clearly aren't listening to Tool or anything that actually counts in that direction. But hey, like, yeah, okay, fine. Compared to, all the right reasons, it is.
Yeah.
And then you have the question of, in your opinion, why does this band have such a bad reputation? And by far, the most common response that people gave was some variation on the bandwagon theory, i.e. the idea that people only hate Nickelback because it's a popular thing to do and it makes them seem cool. So I don't know. What do you think of that, Cal?
There's some truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the bandwagon formed because Nickelback is factually bad.
Yes.
But I do agree that there's a piling on effect that occurred.
I absolutely think that there is a grain of truth to this. In terms of like how many bad bands exist in the world and existed in the early 2000s, and why was it just these guys that reached that level? There was definitely a meme. There's definitely some kind of bandwagon going on.
Yep. As you brought up a couple times, fucking Puddle of Mud got a pass somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Yeah, the bandwagon theory holds up. I can't agree with it's the only reason people hate Nickelback.
Yeah.
These people got to realize a lot of people hate Nickelback because it's just not good.
Yeah. Like, just for a lot of people, it's hard for them to understand, well, I like this thing so much. How could anyone hear it and not like get joy out of it? It's like, oh, they're just faking it. They're just pretending to be cool. Whereas I think like hating Nickelback on the internet or like liking an anti-Nickelback post, it doesn't really make you cool. It makes you normal. Like, I don't think a lot of these people realize how in the minority they are. I see this a lot where people will say something like, well, how can they really be so hated if they sold 50 million records? And it's like, no, the world is a really big place.
Yeah.
There is room enough for 50 million people that like Nickelback and 500 million that hate them.
Yes. Yep.
And like people are like kind of sometimes questioning whether this anti-Nickelback sentiment is truly translates to real life or whether or not it's just like something people say on the internet.
No, it does. Maybe 50% of the bars I like to go to, and we're including like shitty dive bars in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
50% of them, if you put Nickelback on the jukebox, you get groans.
Yeah. I mean, maybe some people out there actually like Nickelback and are pretending not to, but I really doubt that many people like.
No, most people wear that flag proudly.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. The people I've met that do actually like Nickelback,
yeah, they'll say
they're vocal about it.
Yeah. So a lot of people also cited the idea that the reason people hate Nickelback is because they were kind of overexposed or oversaturated, too much plays on the radio. Mm-hmm. That to me definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yep, totally true. That was my hate. I even said it in the episode. That was my hatred of Rockstar. I had to hear it too much. If I had heard it once or twice, I would have just written it off as a song I don't like. Mm-hmm. It turned into hatred because of how much I heard it.
Yes, and like that's not something that Nickelback's even responsible for. Like they're not the ones like setting the radio programs. Like it got played because the programmers wanted it played, and the programmers wanted it played because it was getting good responses. And it's a classic example of becoming a victim of your own success.
Yep.
And then a few people kind of acknowledge that like the lyrics are cringy or sexist, or at least that people see the lyrics as cringy or sexist, whether or not the individual themselves actually agree with that fact. And like some people kind of acknowledged the other truth that we talked about, that Chad has a very simplistic, very radio friendly style of songwriting, and not everyone's into that. And then like kind of the line that usually follows that is like, okay, well, he's written all these like kind of radio songs, but if you really dive into the deep cuts of Nickelback, like that's when you really understand how great they are. So like the songs like The Hammer's Coming Down
I know,
essentially would be an example of that.
I've listened to every song and I'm not buying that argument.
No, yeah, I'm sorry, but like there really aren't that many Nickelback deep cuts, unless you count Leader of Men, that really changed my opinion of who they are. So then there's this one response by a guy named Drew that had like a kind of a lengthy rambling response that kind of went all over the map, but I want to quote it anyway just because I feel like it'll be fun to try to unpack this. So Drew writes, quote, "They have cool fun party music just like Van Halen 20 years earlier, and on the earlier records some actual in my feels type jams too. I think people might also resent the fact that the songs are pretty simple musically and lyrically, but like so is Nirvana. Chad Kroeger just isn't the certified sad boy that Kurt Cobain was. And whereas they're both from really small towns, Kurt ended up being a complete far-left idol, and Chad is more center / maybe even a little right. So that's just another thing for edgy people on the internet to get all hot and bothered about."
Okay. There's a lot here, dude. So even if you assume his base assumption that Kurt's far left and Chad is center right is true, even if that's true, he's assuming that that's why people hate Nickelback.
Yeah.
So he comes off. To me, this is one of those like the right's persecuted people.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says that's another thing for edgy internet people to get mad about. So I don't know. It's hard to take this guy's opinion seriously. He's got a lot of built-in other issues going on here.
He's he's clearly like, there's an us versus them undercurrent to a lot of what he's saying. It's like the them are like the cool people, the hipsters, the musical elite, the people on the left, and the us is like the people on who like Chad Kroeger's music,
small town country boys. He even brings up like they're both from small towns.
Yeah, and like Nirvana's music, it's deceptively simple. I think it's also kind of deceptively sophisticated if you really break down what they're doing, particularly in songs like "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Well, he's not recognizing there's a huge difference in the level of creativity.
Yes.
In the average Nirvana album versus the average Nickelback one. Absolutely.
And in terms of what came before it and what came after it.
Yeah, did Nickelback change the landscape of music, guy?
No.
I mean, come on.
Fuck no. And also, even the politics, he may or may not be right about Chad's politics, but we don't know because Chad has written what he says are anti-Trump songs, but and he wrote a revolutionary song.
I will say I'll agree with the center portion.
Yeah.
Chad does not take a stand on anything ever.
No. I could see why someone would get confused and think Chad is a little right-leaning.
Yes.
Because all of even his quote-unquote political songs are so general to the point of being meaningless.
Yep. And what I don't understand is saying Kurt is far left.
Yeah,
Kurt is not out really here singing communist doctrine songs. He's not crass.
No, in his time, he was a little bit left, I guess, because he considered himself a feminist. But I think what the guy really means is that I kind of like the certified sad boy remark. It's all the cool kids,
they're writing depressing songs.
Yeah, like Kurt, and he became valued for writing these these sentimental songs, whereas Chad also technically kind of writes those kind of songs, just he doesn't sell it in a way that Kurt does.
My counter argument to him is the cool kids also like the Beastie Boys, and all they sing about is partying in a jokey way.
Yeah, I don't know. So, but it's a good way of getting into the mindset of how these people think, and it's a lot of it is they like Nickelback maybe a little bit because Nickelback is more easily accessible than some of the hipster bands that they think are overrated, and they can't see the difference between something like what Chad's doing and something like what Kurt Cobain is doing. So then the next question is, do you feel that a lot of people in the music world misunderstand Nickelback? If so, what are they not getting? And this is kind of similar to the last question. So you get a lot of mentions of people bandwagoning. They pretend to hate Nickelback just because it's cool. Which, like, I gotta say, if you are that guy, if you genuinely like Nickelback, but you make anti-Nickelback memes because you're trying to impress some girl or get more friends, that is sadder than that's sadder than the guy who listens to Nickelback 3 hours a day.
Yes.
Like, there's no way anybody's that bad. And then a lot of people say that, like, they don't understand that Nickelback is just a simple rock and roll band. And I kind of get that.
Yeah.
Like, Nickelback is trying to be more like AC/DC, where, like, they're not trying to change the landscape of music. They're not trying to write Bohemian Rhapsody with every song. They're just trying to make people, they want people to rock out and have a good time, and that's it.
No, I guess I do understand that. I guess because I don't really like AC/DC that much.
Yeah.
For a lot of the same reasons. I think we're just after different things in our music.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I need to unpack that more, because AC/DC is massively popular and does that, but people don't hate them.
Yeah, they're considered part of the canon of classic rock, even though I don't mind AC/DC musically. I get why they're not like that, great on a musical level. It's just like but it is kind of annoying hearing them only talk about rock music and women in every song.
Well, I guess that's the big difference there for me. This comes back to the lyrics. I'd far rather listen to a song like Hell's Bells, where it's just kind of generally cool, than fucking Something in Your Mouth, where it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, Nickelback is too on the nose and too gross and vulgar.
Yeah, it's not that we don't understand that they're just trying to be a simple rock band. I think it's the way they approach being a simple rock band that upsets people.
Yeah, it's like they take riffs that are otherwise okay and sully them by having the dumbest lyrics possible. All right, so then the next question is, have you ever been personally teased, insulted, or trolled for professing a positive opinion of Nickelback? And this one, like there's actually kind of an interesting range of responses here. Some of them claim that they never really got any hatred at all, whereas some people said that, oh yeah, I get teased all the time, but you know what? I don't care.
I think this is a direct function of where you are growing up.
Yes.
If you're in New York or LA, you're going to get ripped on for liking Nickelback. If you're in fucking small town Alabama, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
You're probably in the majority.
Yeah. I am sure that guys who work at a hardware store in Nebraska, we could bring all their friends, all their coworkers to a Nickelback concert. And
actually, I can say that from experience. I have an aunt that likes Nickelback and doesn't get what's wrong with it, and she's up in Green Bay.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
It absolutely does. Hats off to the kid who works at a cafe in Brooklyn and shows up wearing a Nickelback t-shirt. Unironically,
he's the real.
Everyone
warrior.
assumes he's being ironic, but he really does go home and jam out to Something in Your Mouth. So one girl wrote, yes, I grew up literally bullied for liking Nickelback as early as second grade and all the way through middle, high school, and even college, where I was once pointed at and laughed at for wearing a Nickelback shirt. A lot of the responses were like this one from a woman named Miranda. She writes, quote, yes, but joke's on them because I'm out here enjoying Nickelback and they're sad about life. Now, Kel, it's true, at least in my case, I am sad about life, but it has nothing to do with Nickelback. There's a host of other reasons why I lay awake, worry with existential dread, but only part of it is because of the effect that Trad Kruger's music has had on me.
The ice caps are literally going to melt. It's too late to stop it. And
the hammer's coming down.
I'm more sad that I just don't get Nickelback.
It's just I don't know, I wonder if it's truly the case where the people who love Nickelback are these shiny, happy people that are just very well balanced and
I do not think so.
And all of us haters are just bitter, grumpy, depressed trolls.
I don't think so.
It's like you don't vibe with a song like "Burn It to the Ground."
Yes,
or
exactly.
This means war. If you're happy about life, but and then finally, Brandon writes, "Absolutely, but a lie will often travel the world before the truth even surfaces."
Wow.
I
See, this is why Brandon thinks Nickelback's lyrics are deceptively deep.
I wonder. I have no doubt that he actually believes this.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the people who are into Nickelback now in 2022 are getting out of it that that they're conscious of being an aggrieved minority, and they're conscious of the fact that everyone in the world is against them, and I wonder if that reinforces their belief all the harder.
Yeah, I think
know?
you're totally onto something.
In that sense, it's kind of like a religious cult that gets called out or breaks off from its mainstream church. Like, I wonder if a lot of these people liked Nickelback in 2001 when everybody else did, and then by the late 2000s, people are starting to hate on Nickelback, and they didn't jump on that bandwagon, and they just clung to it harder and harder, and now maybe they like Nickelback or claim to like Nickelback more than their actual music taste allows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's
totally.
I've seen this happen like in my own mind, and again, taking it to the realm of politics. Like I can't stand Joe Biden.
Mhm.
Like I voted for him like out of what I felt was necessity, but the presidency has largely been a cringe fest to watch. And yet, whenever I see a "Let's Go Brandon" meme or some douchebag with a Trump flag,
Yep.
that makes me want to cling to my Biden support 10 times harder, because the alternative is that
Yes.
shit.
And the exact opposite, if some of you guys are having trouble understanding people's dedication to Trump,
Yeah.
it's because we did that exact same shit to them.
Yeah,
It's an easy concept.
It's like they hate us so much, like that they'll be willing to throw their weight behind this guy that they know is an idiot. I get that. I understand it. And so I wonder if that's what's happening a little bit with Nickelback people. Like, they know that like Chad Kroeger is not like a Cobain level genius, but they also know that the people who like are wearing Nirvana t-shirts and reading Pitchfork on their iPhones, like, they find those people so obnoxious, and in many ways they should. Like, they hate those people so much that they will publicly like Nickelback as a way of trolling those idiots. And then finally, we get to the question of what other artists or genres of music do you listen to regularly? And this is the question that, to me, had the most surprising answers of all. Like, Cal, we mentioned, I think, in episode 2 that we kind of joked, like, you can only like Nickelback if you've never heard any band that sounds different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
but here, like, what people said in response to this question, there is a truly astonishing amount of diversity here. Like, for example, some people mentioned other post-grunge bands like Theory of a Dead Man, but you also got people who said they liked nu metal, classic rock, black metal, death metal, electronica, Christian rap, whatever that is.
We got to look that up.
Yeah, right. People said they like bluegrass, classical music, Radiohead, Green Day, 3 Days Grace, prog metal, krautrock, trip hop, like just pretty much anything you can think of, good or bad, was represented on here. One guy specifically cited Primus, Mr. Bungle, and Slint.
I can't reconcile that in my head. How one human being can love both Slint and Nickelback.
Yeah, a complete opposite goals as musicians. It's like, forget apples and oranges. It's like it's apples and filet mignon.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they're completely different like goals.
I guess maybe that does feed into the chicken strips theory again, of like, they can appreciate a good French cuisine 5-star meal,
Mhm.
But every now and then they just want a fucking chicken strip basket. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of how you listen to both those things.
Yeah, it's like, it's like as great as Mr. Bungle is, like they're not going to give you that like head-banging stadium
No.
rocker like Burn It to the Ground. Like that's just not in their playbook. So if you want something like that, like Nickelback might be the avenue that you turn to.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a little mind bending.
Yeah. One guy claimed that he listened to a lot of technical death metal.
I don't believe him. I've had this happen before where, someone in good faith trying to make conversation with me wants to talk about, and they'll say like, I know some good death metal. And then they'll list a band that's just
Like Slipknot.
not even close. You're going, no, dude, I wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry. I can't talk to you about this.
Yeah. So is it like the opposite of what they were saying earlier, or like people are trying to sound cool and like make us take their Nickelback fandom more seriously?
Yeah, I do think it's that. I also listen to this stuff that you will like. And
Yeah.
if you like that, maybe I can talk you into some Nickelback.
I mean, to be fair, there were some people that listed Nickelback and also a bunch of other shitty bands or bands that were shittier than Nickelback. And that makes more sense to me that like compared to like that turd pool, Nickelback would seem to like have the most like glisten to them. But I really do think it's the idea that the chicken strips theory is that like they want something that's palatable.
Yeah.
They can also listen to other things sometimes, but Nickelback gives them that like basic home comfort that none of those other bands provide.
I am surprised to not see more country overlap on this list.
There was some, but not nearly as much as I expected. And I agree with you, Cal. I expected every one of these people to like country because, we'll say it for the upteenth time, Nickelback is stealth country.
Maybe that's the trick then, or the key is they would like country except for that it sounds like country.
Yes.
And this is taking those ideas and putting it in a way that they like it.
If you want to like country but aren't from the South, don't have that twang, don't identify with that culture, like, or just have a generally negative association with country, because outside of country, people who grow up with country music, most people are intuitively primed to hate country music. Like, if you don't want to just make that leap and start liking a genre that you're not supposed to like, Nickelback's an easy way out, because they have the same features. They are lyrically driven. They don't have too much instrumentation. They have like a lot of like catchy, dopey hooks, and like even a lot of the instrumentation and the melodic structure of how Chad sings is very similar to what I hear a lot in country.
The metal overlap doesn't surprise me at all. That's probably the one they're most closely aligned with. Classic rock, probably the most, and then next is metal.
If all you like about rock music is just the heavy guitars and you're not really paying attention to any other aspect of it, like, how would you be able to distinguish Nickelback from Tool or
any
like,
post-grunge
or any post-grunge, for any real grunge, any Alice in Chains, any like The Clash.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like anything that's actually good or interesting, in Metallica for that matter. There are only really a couple of genres in this section of the response that I didn't see a whole lot of, and that was like indie rock music, actual punk rock music like Dead Kennedys, like Rudimentary Peni, like, or jazz music. I didn't see a whole lot of those genres represented, and that's because I think that kind of stuff is the true antithesis to what Nickelback is doing.
Mm-hmm.
There is zero overlap between people who would go to an Arcade Fire concert and people who would go to a Nickelback concert.
Yeah,
like,
that makes perfect sense, because
yeah.
those genres are all about artistic integrity and experimentation and nothing else.
Yeah.
If you sell too many albums, you're out of the scene.
Yes. If you make a conscious effort to appeal to as many people as possible, like, you're out of all of those clubs.
Yep.
And that was like when the few times that Chad Kruger takes pot shots at other genres. Like it tends to be at like hipsters or indie rock or anyone that like is in the pitchfork crowd.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense.
Because those are the people that it would seem hate Nickelback the most.
Yep.
So I think these survey results were really fascinating. And I guess among other things, it proves that there is more diversity and complexity in Nickelback fandom than there is in Nickelback's music itself. All right, so that just about wraps things up for today's episode. Cal, what do you think we learned today?
I think the most interesting thing for me is and I want to expand on it in the next part, is the idea you brought up about they're like an oppressed minority in their own minds.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that they're fighting back solely because of how many people are giving them shit.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just an endless thing to explore in the psyche of a 2021 Nickelback fan.
Yeah, it's like, I hate to like bring politics up again, but like it reminds me of QAnon in a weird way. Like where everyone is laughing at you and the only support you can get is from your own echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
So like I actually saw some of the people who wrote in the survey said that like every time they hate Nickelback, they hate on Nickelback, it only makes me like them more.
Nope.
So
your hate makes me stronger.
All right, well, folks, we only have one episode left in this series, but this last chapter may well be the most dramatic and contentious of them all. You see, folks, if it's not clear by now, Cal and I do not like Nickelback. But beyond simply stating that they're bad, we'd like to flesh things out a little bit deeper. What exactly is it that makes Nickelback such an obnoxious band? In the fourth and final installment of this series, we will present to you our grand unified theory on why Nickelback sucks, complete with a countdown of the top 10 reasons that people hate this band. In so doing, we'll dive even deeper into Chad's songwriting, share some more cringeworthy songs, and even share what science, yes, science, has to say about why people hate Nickelback. All that's coming up in Nickelback Part 4. All right, you excited, Cal?
I am very excited.
What are you most excited to learn about?
I want to hear the science. I want to hear that our bullshit is backed up by some study somewhere.
It is a survey that gained some headlines a few years ago. But I'll have to wait to share it.
Yeah,
it's
well, I guess that's not how
it's
science.
Amazing that it got to that level in the first place. Like,
and I know that's not how science is supposed to work, where we have a theory and then we find science that backs it up. but
that's how science works in the internet age.
Yeah, I'm into that for this.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Thanks again to the Nickel posting board and the subreddit and everybody in the Nickelback fandom who took the time to fill out this survey. I encourage you guys to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you want to email us, we are at polishingturdspodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. All right. Thank you so much. And always do the next right thing.
America, cheese gives food a new attitude that's sure to please. Give it the flavor of a bluegrass fest. Cheese gives all the recipes new zest. Give American food a new attitude with cheese.